I opened a file named after my daughter's birthday and saw my brother's face wiring a camera into our living room smoke detector. He looked straight into the lens, smiled, whispered something I couldn't hear. That camera wasn't mine, and neither was the footage. I'm 41. A single dad to an 8-year-old girl who thinks peanut butter on waffles is high art. Her mom died 3 years ago. Cancer. Fast. Brutal. The kind that rips the ground from under your kid's feet before she learns how to stand. Caleb had always been restless. The kind of guy who'd start things with fire in his eyes and abandon them just as quickly. But he loved Sophie. Genuinely. And I needed help, especially when I took a second job doing night shifts at the hospital to cover the mounting bills. He watched her after school, made dinner, helped with homework. Sophie adored him. Said he made the best mac and cheese and let her stay up late to watch movies. I didn't ask too many questions. Just thanked him and tried not to let the guilt eat me alive. The first strange thing was small. One night I came home early. Rainstorm had knocked out a few power lines and canceled most of the yard's evening traffic. I walked into the house quiet, expecting to find them on the couch watching cartoons. Instead, I found the living room dark, Caleb in the hallway looking startled, like I'd caught him sneaking in past curfew. He said Sophie had just gone to bed, but her bedroom door was wide open. She wasn't inside. I found her curled up in the laundry room, sound asleep, clutching her old blanket like a lifeline. Caleb said she'd had a nightmare, and he didn't want to wake her by moving her. I believed him. At the time. Another week passed. Then I noticed the baby monitor in her room, something I'd stopped using years ago, had been plugged back in. The camera was active. Red light blinking in the dark. I didn't remember turning it on, but I figured maybe Caleb had done it to keep an eye on her. She'd had a bad cold that week. It made sense. I let it go. But then the charger for my work laptop went missing. I asked Caleb. He said he hadn't seen it. 2 days later, I found it in the attic trunk under old Christmas stuff, along with a hard drive, unlabeled, tucked under a flannel blanket that still smelled like our mother's old house. I plugged it in. Hundreds of video files, all from inside my house. Kitchen, living room, Sophie's room. Some from angles I didn't recognize, cameras I hadn't installed. Footage going back at least 2 months. I couldn't breathe. My fingers went numb on the mouse. My heart hammered against my ribs like it was trying to get out. My first instinct was to scream, to yank the hard drive out and go wake Sophie, grab her, run. But I didn't. Instead, I just sat there, frozen, not out of calm, but shock. My brain refused to process what I was seeing. Some irrational part of me still hoped there was a reasonable explanation. At first, I told myself it was paranoia. Maybe Caleb was just overcautious. Maybe he'd meant well. Maybe. Then I clicked on a file marked with the date of Sophie's birthday. That's when I saw him, setting up the camera, whispering into his phone, saying something I couldn't hear clearly, except one sentence. "Yeah, I've got them. Everything you asked for." My blood turned cold. Because whoever he was talking to, it wasn't me. And that's when denial died. That's when I knew Caleb wasn't just helping. He was watching us, recording us, for someone else. And I had no idea why. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the edge of the couch, watching hours of footage I couldn't unsee. Caleb, walking through the house like he owned it, adjusting cameras in the corners, labeling files by date and time. And worst of all, a few clips where he was talking to Sophie like nothing was wrong. Like he wasn't betraying the very trust I'd handed him when I said, "She's all I've got now. Take care of her." The next morning, I didn't confront him. Not yet. I went to work like normal, ran my shifts, nodded through conversation. But underneath the surface, I was boiling. Not just with anger, with confusion, with fear, with this growing, gnawing question in my chest. Who was he sending the footage to? And why? That night, I came home early again. Didn't warn him. Walked through the front door and found Caleb in the kitchen, stirring a pot of spaghetti, wearing the apron Sophie had made in art class. He looked up and smiled, said dinner would be ready soon. I looked at him, really looked, and felt something old and unfamiliar rise up in me. Distrust. I trusted Caleb since we were kids. I was the older one, the steady one. He was wild but harmless. The guy who skipped school to follow a band across state lines, who once spent our rent money on cryptocurrency and somehow made it back threefold. He'd made mistakes, a lot of them, but never like this. That night, after Sophie went to bed, I told him I needed to talk. We sat on the porch. I didn't raise my voice, didn't accuse, just asked one question. Why are there cameras in my house that I didn't install? He didn't flinch. Didn't deny it either. Just leaned back in the chair, exhaled slow, and said, "You weren't supposed to see that." I stared at him. "You want to try again?" I said. My voice sounded strange in my own ears, steady, low, like a man holding back a tidal wave. He didn't answer right away. Just looked out at the yard, like it might offer an exit. Then he said something that chilled me to the bone. "It's not what you think. I wasn't spying on you. I was protecting you." I almost laughed. "By recording my daughter's bedroom?" "She was never in danger," he said quickly. "Not from me." "Then from who?" I asked. That's when he told me. Said he'd gotten involved with a guy he met online, someone in security, surveillance, private intel work. Said the guy offered him money to beta test a new software that tracked behavior in high-stress domestic environments. Something about predictive algorithms, home safety. It all sounded like marketing speak to me. But then Caleb looked me dead in the eye and said he knew about Sophie before I ever mentioned her. That stopped me cold. He asked if you had kids, Caleb said. Then he said, "The girl. 8, right?" Like he already knew. Like someone had told him. That's when Caleb claimed he'd flipped the script. Started playing along to figure out what the guy really wanted. Said he installed the cameras to gather footage, but kept copies for himself. Started tracing IPs, trying to follow the digital breadcrumbs. "I was trying to protect you," he said again. I didn't know how to tell you without freaking you out. And I wanted to believe him. God help me, I did. But all I could think about was that footage. The camera in Sophie's room. The way he'd said, "I've got them." "You should have come to me," I said. My voice cracked. I didn't know how he whispered. Then he stood up, walked inside, and left me on the porch with a head full of questions and a heart split in two. That night, I didn't sleep either. I stayed up combing through the hard drive, looking for clues, for names, for anything that could tell me who was on the other end of those files. I checked metadata, IP logs, cached folders he probably thought were deleted. And somewhere around 4 a.m., I found a note buried in the file structure. Encrypted. Titled, "For Aaron, if things go bad." I stared at it for a long time before opening it. And what I read next changed everything I thought I knew about Caleb. About our family. About the reason he'd really come home. I opened the file expecting some kind of apology, maybe a frantic explanation, or a just-in-case farewell. What I found instead was a confession. Not the kind that ends with a clean break, but the kind that rewrites everything that came before it. "Aaron, if you're reading this, I probably screwed up worse than I planned. I'm sorry. I didn't come back just to help you with Sophie. That was true, but it wasn't the whole truth. I came back because someone was asking questions about Dad. Not just who he was, what he did. And I think it's finally catching up to us." I stopped reading right there. My chest got tight. "Dad? Our father died when I was 21 and Caleb was 16. Heart attack. Sudden. Or so we were told. He'd been a truck mechanic most of his life, quiet, steady, the kind of man who never raised his voice but made you feel it when he frowned. We never questioned it. Never needed to. He was gone. We grieved. We moved on. But Caleb's next words cracked the coffin open. "Do you remember the garage on Route 11? The one he never let us near? I broke into it 2 years ago. After everything fell apart in San Diego. I wanted answers, Tom. I found files. IDs. Photos. Notes in a language I couldn't read. And a contact list. One of the names was that guy I told you about, the one who paid me to test software. He wasn't testing anything. He was vetting me. Because of Dad. Because of what Dad used to do." I kept reading, heart pounding, mouse trembling in my hand. I think Dad worked for someone. Government maybe. Maybe not. Something off-book. Something that didn't leave paper trails. And now, someone out there is tying up loose ends. I installed the cameras to find out what they were after. Not to hurt you. But I think they want Sophie. My stomach dropped. My daughter. I don't know why. But the guy, the one I sent files to? He asked about her. More than once. He said patterns form early. I'm scared, Tom. I didn't mean to drag her into this. If I disappear, know this. They're not watching you. They're watching her. And I think they think she's special. Like Dad. Like me. I closed the file. Sat back. Just breathed. Or tried to. Suddenly, every strange thing Caleb had done in the past 2 months, the paranoia, the cameras, the secrecy, it all snapped into place like teeth on a trap. And worse than that, it made sense. I thought my brother was being careless. Turns out, he was being hunted. And now? Now I needed to find out who was hunting my daughter. The next morning, I took the hard drive to an old friend of mine, Nate, an IT guy who'd helped install our security system years ago. Quiet guy. Reliable. The kind of man who still ran Linux just because he didn't trust Windows. He looked through the metadata and found something I'd missed. An IP address. Logged multiple times. Traced back to a shell corporation in Arlington, Virginia. Defense contractors. Off books. Nate looked at me and said, "This isn't just spyware, Aaron. This is behavioral mapping. Military-grade stuff." I asked him what they'd want with an 8-year-old. He didn't answer right away. Then he said, "If she's got whatever they think your dad had, they may not be planning to watch her forever. They may be planning to use her." That's when it hit me. This wasn't just surveillance. It was recruitment. Or worse, grooming. I left Nate's house shaking. I got home, and Caleb was gone. His car, his backpack, vanished. No note. No goodbye. Just one open browser tab on my laptop. A search query. How to tell if your memories aren't yours. That was 5 days ago. I haven't heard from him since. But something tells me he's still out there. Still running. Still trying to outrun the shadows our father left behind. And me? I locked down the house. Pulled Sophie out of school. Bought a new phone. Changed every password. Because if they think they're coming for her, they have no idea what kind of father they're dealing with. The morning after Caleb vanished, I drove Sophie out to my friend Peter's cabin. It's 2 hours outside the city, buried in pine trees and long silences. No Wi-Fi. No neighbors. Just a wood stove, a lake out back, and a rickety bunk bed she used to beg to sleep on when Julia was still alive. She thought it was a vacation. I didn't correct her. I told Peter what was going on, or part of it, anyway, that someone had been watching us, that I needed to keep Sophie off-grid for a while. He didn't ask for details, just handed me the keys, clapped a hand on my shoulder, and said, "You call if you need backup." No hesitation. I stayed 2 nights with her, pretending everything was fine. We fished, made pancakes, watched the fire crackle. But I didn't sleep. Not really. My mind kept circling that one awful sentence from Caleb's note. They think she's special. Special how? What had they seen? I started combing through old footage on the hard drive. Not the creepy stuff, not the sleeping or the vulnerable moments. Just the ordinary ones. Homework, dinner, playtime. Looking for anything that might show what they'd been tracking. It was subtle, but it was there. Sophie talking to herself in the mirror, but not like a kid playing pretend. Like she was testing something. Repeating sentences. Watching her own face. Then writing something in her notebook. I found the notebook. Inside were pages of symbols I didn't recognize. Not doodles. Not scribbles. Patterns. Recurring shapes. Almost encoded. One page stood out. Circled in red crayon. The numbers don't change, only the people do. I didn't know what it meant, but I knew it wasn't something a 3rd grader should be writing on her own. That night, I made a decision. I wasn't going to wait for them to knock on my door. I was going to find them first. I started with the name Caleb had mentioned in his note, the one tied to the IP logs, Evermark Systems. Buried in a dozen LLCs, registered to an address in Arlington that didn't lead to a real building, just a post office box. I called in a favor from an old ER buddy, Deshaun, who used to work Army intelligence before med school. I told him I had a bad feeling about something and needed eyes on a few names. He owed me. Didn't ask why. Just said, "Give me 24 hours. What he found made my blood run cold. Evermark had contracts with 3 federal agencies, none of them public. Behavioral analytics, youth cognitive performance tracking, surveillance AI training data. And one particular name kept surfacing on internal memos. Dr. Lynn Harrow. I'd never heard of her. But Deshaun had. Used to be DARPA, he said. Now she runs her own think tank. Black box stuff. Nobody knows what they're working on, but there's chatter that it involves early pattern neurological mapping in minors. I said nothing, because I was already thinking of that red crayon sentence. The numbers don't change, only the people do. She's based out of D.C., Deshaun said. But the last known research site? Right here. Outside Riverton. Used to be a juvenile rehab center. Closed down 5 years ago. Guess what it is now? I didn't guess. He told me. Privately owned testing facility. Leased by Evermark Systems. It was less than an hour from where Caleb and I grew up. I didn't tell anyone I was going. Didn't want Peter to talk me down. Didn't want Nate to try tracing anything. Didn't want Sophie to see the fear in my eyes. I just printed off every piece of evidence I had. Burned a copy of the hard drive. Wrote a note for Sophie, just in case, told her to trust Peter, that I'd be back, that I loved her more than the stars and all the sky between them. And then I drove. The facility sat behind a chain-link fence wrapped in ivy. No signs. No cameras I could see, but I didn't trust that. I parked half a mile away, hiked through the woods, waited until dusk, slipped through a break in the fence that looked older than the building itself. It wasn't abandoned. I could see faint light in the windows, hear a generator hum. Inside, I found locked doors, concrete floors, old file cabinets, and then, in an office near the back, a bulletin board. Dozens of photos. Children. Candid shots. Park benches. Schoolyards. Classrooms. Surveillance. I searched the faces one by one. And then I saw her. Sophie. In our backyard. On the swing. Caleb was in the background. Blurred. Head turned. There was a yellow sticky note on the corner of the photo. One word. Candidate. I nearly ripped the board off the wall. Then I heard it. A footstep. And a voice. You shouldn't be here. I turned, and there she was. Dr. Lynn Harrow. Hair tied back. Lab coat. Calm eyes that didn't match the alarm in my chest. Your errand, she said, like she was reciting a line she'd practiced. I didn't answer. Didn't move. I was hoping you'd come, she added. Your brother was never very good at follow-through. I stepped closer. What do you want from my daughter? She smiled soft, almost sad. It's not what we want from her, she said. It's what we believe she's capable of. But you're asking the wrong questions. Then give me the right ones, I growled. She nodded toward the board. Ask yourself this, Aaron. Why did Caleb really come home? Who sent him? And just like that, the world tilted again. Because in that moment, I realized. She wasn't chasing Caleb. She'd hired him. And whatever he'd found, he'd been part of it all along. I stood there, frozen, while Dr. Lynn Harrow stepped between me and the wall of photographs, as if protecting it was more important than protecting the children in it. You're lying, I said, but even I could hear the crack in my voice. She didn't deny it, didn't confirm it either. She just reached into a drawer behind her and pulled out a thin gray folder, tossed it on the desk like it weighed nothing. But I could feel the weight from across the room. Inside were photos, reports, audio transcripts, and a document signed in Caleb's handwriting. Contract agreement, behavioral data acquisition field agent. Project ID, Ensemble. Subject, Sophie R. Carson. Objective, long-form observation in a domestic environment. Natural cognitive expression. Emotional triggers. Self-initiated pattern behaviors. My daughter was the subject. And Caleb, my brother, was the one who signed up to watch her. I didn't trick him, Harrow said, voice quiet. He came to us. On his own. Brought the first video. Told us she was different. I felt my heart slam against my ribs. You used him. She tilted her head. We paid him. He signed a contract. He was enthusiastic at first. Believed he was helping you. That's what made him valuable. He wasn't acting. He loved her. Still does. I didn't know which part made me sicker, the betrayal or the way she said it so casually. Like love and manipulation could live in the same breath. I stared down at the file. One phrase repeated, again and again, in red ink at the margins. Subject displays spontaneous logic stacking without external prompting. Memory pattern recall exceeds age bracket by 4 years. Possible inheritance of C-variant cognition. What is C-variant? I asked. She smiled, not smug, but clinical. It's what your father had, she said. A cognitive subtype we identified during early military trials. Rare. Unpredictable. A pattern recognition bias paired with adaptive logic looping. People with C-variant don't just learn, they intuit. Project? Encode. She stepped closer. Most people think in straight lines. They see what's in front of them. But your father, and now your daughter, see the shape of things before they form. It's like solving a puzzle while the pieces are still falling. I said nothing. And if that potential can be trained, she added softly, it becomes more than intelligence. It becomes influence. My throat tightened. You're lying. She didn't argue. Just reached into the desk drawer behind her and pulled out a file. Tossed it on the desk between us. I opened it with shaking hands. Inside, a black and white photo I'd never seen. My dad, much younger, in a military-looking facility, standing beside a chalkboard covered in symbols. His name handwritten in the corner. Below it, Sync ID, 147, A/Carson, Daniel. Next page, an internal memo. Redacted. Most of it blacked out, but one line stood out in block letters. Subject displays consistent Category C neurological markers. Recommended for long-term monitoring. He was never just a mechanic, she said. That was a cover. Your father worked for a program called SYNC, mid-70s Cold War initiative designed to identify early-stage abstract cognition in military families. He tested off the charts. Pattern projection, linguistic absorption, subconscious encryption. My fingers clenched the folder. No, that's not who he was. That's who you thought he was, she said quietly. That's what you were meant to believe. And Sophie? I asked. She softened again. Like I was the child now. She's extraordinary. We don't want to hurt her. We want to understand her. Study her. Help her reach her potential. You want to own her? No, she said, almost offended. We want to cultivate her. I stepped forward. You're not going to get that chance. She didn't move. Just looked at me like I was the one who didn't understand the rules anymore. Aaron, she said gently, do you really think you're the first parent to try and stop us? I didn't answer. I just backed out of that room, heart pounding, eyes burning. The folder was still in my hands. I didn't ask if I could take it. She didn't stop me. Didn't even blink. And that's when it hit me, she wanted me to leave with it. Not because she couldn't stop me, but because this was part of the game. A calculated release. Letting me carry just enough truth to destabilize me, to make me paranoid. Or maybe, to see what I'd do next. She wasn't afraid of exposure. She was testing me, or setting something in motion I didn't yet understand. By the time I reached the parking lot, the weight of it hit me. I wasn't escaping. I was being released. And that meant one thing. They weren't done with us yet. Which meant one thing. This wasn't over. I drove back to the cabin like my hands were separate from my body. When I opened the door, Sophie looked up from the table where she was drawing. She smiled, ran over, hugged me like nothing had changed. And for her, maybe nothing had. But for me, everything had. That night, when she was asleep, I took the drawings she'd made, dozens of them, and laid them out in a grid on the cabin floor, looking for patterns. Anything that might explain what Harrow meant. And I found one. Every third page had the same symbol, hidden in the corners. A sideways 8. Not quite an infinity symbol. More like a broken loop. Sometimes it was part of a tree. Other times, tucked into a cloud. In one drawing, it was carved into the door of a house that looked exactly like the one I grew up in. The next morning, I asked her about it. She looked confused at first, then pointed at it with a sleepy hand and said, "It's the inside number." What does that mean? I asked gently. She shrugged. It's just what I see sometimes. In my head. Before I wake up. And that's when I remembered. Our dad used to say the same thing. Back when I was a kid, he'd sit at the kitchen table, eyes tired, hands stained with oil, and tell me, I had the inside number dream again. I always thought it was a joke. Some weird adult phrase, like gut feeling or déjà vu. But now? Now I think it was a code. A marker. Something embedded. And later, when I was going through the folder Harrow let me walk out with, I saw it again. Scribbled in red ink at the bottom corner of a classified memo. A symbol. That same broken loop. No label. No explanation. Just there. I don't think it's a coincidence. I think it's theirs. I think it's his. And they knew. Harrow. Sync. Evermark. They'd known for decades. And I realized. Sophie wasn't the first. She was just the first one I refused to give up. That night, I got an email. From Caleb. Just 3 words. They're coming soon. Attached was a GPS coordinate. A trailhead in the forest. An old radio tower. And a timestamp. Tomorrow. Midnight. So now, I sit here writing this on a battered laptop by firelight, knowing I have one more move to make. One more place to go. And maybe, if Caleb is still alive, one more chance to face him. To ask the question I've been afraid of since I opened that folder. Did you come home to help us? Or to deliver her? I left the cabin just before midnight. Sophie was asleep in the loft, curled around her flashlight. I kissed her forehead, told Peter to keep her safe, and drove into the woods with a hard drive in my coat and a fire in my gut. The coordinates led me to an old radio tower off a forgotten fire road. Rusted. Silent. At its base, Caleb. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. You came, he said, as I stepped out. Why now, Caleb? He sat on a log, head low. Because they're coming for her. I bought you time. But that window's closing. What do they want? They think she's like Dad. Like me. Then he handed me a folder. Documents. Contracts. One with his signature. Project Ensemble. Subject, Sophie Carson. Observational period, 6 months. Field Agent, Caleb Carson. I felt my stomach turn. You agreed to watch her. Caleb looked away, jaw clenched. I told myself it was protection, he said. That if I didn't take the job, they'd send someone worse. Someone cold. Someone who didn't care. He paused, swallowed hard. But the truth? I needed the money. I needed a purpose. And they offered both. They knew exactly what to say, that it would help you, help Sophie. I wanted to believe them. He looked back at me, eyes raw, ashamed. But once I saw what they were planning, the footage, the thresholds, the way they talked about her like data, I knew I'd made a mistake I couldn't walk back. What are they planning? Caleb looked down. Full acquisition. They call it a harvest. Once a subject hits their threshold, usually after a key behavioral marker appears, they trigger the transfer protocol. No warning. No appeal. I stared at him. Transfer her how? He swallowed. It's all buried in clinical language. But it's clear enough. Custody reassignment to internal facility. Cognitive realignment under supervised context. It means isolation. Indoctrination. They cut the child off from everything familiar, family, memory, identity. Then rebuild them as something else. So what? They take her and brainwash her? Not in a lab coat and scalpel kind of way, he said. It's cleaner than that. Colder. They don't break kids. They reshape them. Slowly. Precisely. Until what's left is useful. Obedient. Predictable. My chest tightened like it was being crushed from the inside. That's not recruitment, I said. No, he agreed. It's extraction. Of everything that makes her her. I stepped forward, heart pounding. Then we burn it all. I tried, he said. They're already here. He wasn't lying. A noise cracked the silence, movement in the trees. Shapes. Slow, deliberate. Caleb's eyes widened. They're early. He pulled a USB from his coat. Everything I have. Send it public. Don't stop. Then he turned, walked toward the trees, toward the men in black. A distraction. A sacrifice. And I ran. 2 days later, the story hit the wire. Nate helped leak the files, surveillance programs, behavioral contracts, photos of kids, including Sophie. Ensemble wasn't science, it was targeting. Disguised as research. Hidden in shell companies and grant budgets. We expected retaliation. A smear campaign. A visit in the night. But instead, they vanished. Not like cowards. Like professionals. The website disappeared. The GPS pings went dark. Facilities were scrubbed clean. Even Harrow, no trace. Nate said they had contingency protocols. Firewalls that burned everything when triggered. It wasn't panic. It was procedure. And the worst part? No one came knocking. No reporters. No agents. Just silence. Like the world wasn't ready to hear it. Or like the people who saw it already knew and chose to look away. 6 months have passed. Sophie's smile is steady now. She sleeps without the flashlight. But sometimes she says Uncle Caleb visits her in dreams. Maybe he does. I don't know if he's alive. I only know he chose her safety over his own. And me? I sit nearby, quiet. Watching. Guarding. Because she's not theirs. Not a subject. Not a number. She's my daughter. And no one's ever taking her again.